Hello and welcome to the History of Philosophy in China by Peter Adamson and Karen Lai, brought to you with the support of the Philosophy Department at King's College London and the LMU in Munich. Online at historyofphilosophy.net. Today's episode, Live and Let Die, the Zhuangzi on Death. The cradle rocks above an abyss, and common sense tells us that our existence is but a brief crack of light between two eternities of darkness. Although the two are identical twins, man, as a rule, views the prenatal abyss with more calm than the one he is heading for. That's a quotation from the first chapter of Vladimir Nabokov's memoir, Speak Memory. In it, the famous novelist expresses what we might casually call a philosophical attitude towards death. Since we don't fear the time before we were born, why fear the time after we die? Actually, this sentiment is philosophical in a narrower sense, too. It was put forward by much earlier philosophers. Especially the Epicureans used this same symmetry argument to fend off the fear of death. It's also at least suggested in the Zhuangzi, which asks, "Who can see nothingness as his own head, life as his own spine, and death as his own backside?" and says that when we die, non-knowing applies equally to what went before and what is yet to come. But Nabokov comes closest to recapturing an idea from the Zhuangzi when he compares our existence to a mere crack of light. In a strikingly similar image, the Taoist work says that life between heaven and earth is like a white stallion galloping past a crack in the wall, just a sudden whoosh, and then it is all over. In truth, anyone who tries to say something insightful about death is likely to wind up repeating an idea from the Zhuangzi, because death is one of its abiding themes and is approached in numerous passages from a variety of perspectives. The 17th century Confucian scholar Wang Fuzi went so far as to remark that the Zhuangzi is more about death than life. There seem to be several reasons for this. First, remaining resolute in the face of death is an important trait of the perfect sage. As the Zhuangzi puts it, life and death are a great matter, but they are unable to alter him. These Taoist authors owe us an account of how this is possible. What philosophical considerations have made the sage immune to the terror of extinction? Second, other schools of thought at the time were equally fascinated by death, not least when it came to the question of how appropriately to mourn those we have lost. Just remember the Moist criticisms of the elaborate funeral rites defended by the Confucians. As we'll see, the Zhuangzi has something to say about this, too. Third, death is a perfect topic for displaying the benefits of Zhuangzian philosophy, even for us non-sages. Its restlessly questioning tone leads it to ask, why do we think that death is so bad? And its tendency to place the human within the wider frame of a unified and ever-changing cosmos means that it can teach us to see death within that perspective. This is indeed its explanation for why the sage is not altered by death. He looks on the alterations of all things as his own fate and thus holds fast to their source. This idea of alteration or transformation is central to the Zhuangzi's treatment of death. Right after it compares our life to a brief glimpse of a racing stallion, the Zhuangzi sums up much of its thinking on mortality with the blunt remark, "One transformation and you're alive, another and you're dead." A more elaborate treatment of the same idea is found in one of the inner chapters. Here we find the description of a Taoist sage who had his foot chopped off and saw this as nothing more than the casting away of a clump of soil, because looked at from the point of view of their sameness, all things are one. The same attitude can be adopted toward life itself. Its loss is just one more modification within an overall universe, and the universe endures. We see this in the next chapter, chapter 6, which is especially focused on the question of death. It says, "Life and death are fated. That they come with the regularity of day and night is of heaven. It's something humans can do nothing about, simply the way things are." There's nothing really special about death because it is just one more transformation that is dictated by destiny. So when the Taoist sage confronts death with equanimity, this is because he can confront any change, whether it's the loss of a foot or the gaining of a kingdom, with equanimity. As the chapter goes on to say, the human form during its time undergoes 10,000 transformations, never stopping for an instant. So, one's goal should be to bind oneself equally to each and all of the 10,000 things, to let oneself rely on each transformation, on all transformation. Unfortunately, pointing out that death is just one transformation among many isn't a particularly persuasive reason to accept it. Before you've read the Zhuangzi, you will presumably have assumed that losing a hair from your head or a bit of your fingernail is no big deal, whereas losing your foot or your life would be a very big deal indeed. What can the Zhuangzi say to convince us otherwise? One idea might be that at the end of my life, I am not really dying. However radically I am transformed, I will find myself in the appropriately immortal words of the Bee Gees, staying alive. Thus, still in the same chapter 6, we meet another sage who scoffs at the idea that death might be any cause for alarm. His friend is dying and the family is distraught. He sends them away, chastising them, "Do not disturb his transformation," and then tells the friend, "How great is the process of transformation? What will it make you become? Where will it send you? Will it make you into a mouse's liver? Or perhaps an insect's arm?" It's ridiculous to insist that one be reborn as a human, because no matter what one becomes, one will be part of heaven and earth. Where could I go that would not be all right? Total sleep comes, then startled wakings. This passage makes it sound as if my self manages to endure even through the change from human to mouse's liver or insect's arm, the examples presumably being chosen to get across that I don't even need to become another animal. I could become just part of another animal while still being me. To make sense of this idea, we need to have quite a broad view of what philosophers now call personal identity. It's one thing to say that you remain the same individual after losing a body part, like a hair or a foot, and quite another to say that you are the same individual when you become part of someone else's body. But at least some passages in the Zhuangzi seem to be taking this notion seriously. Again, there might be several reasons for this. One would be that the self or person is not really the physical body, but something like the consciousness inhabiting the body. Thus, the body is compared to nothing more than gathering smoke, and those who grieve for the dead are told, "You are looking for a horse in an abandoned stall. Even if you forget the previous me, there remains something of me untouched by any forgetting." This aspect of the Zhuangzi helped to inspire more religious approaches in later Taoism, which posit an immortal self that ascends after death to unity with the cosmos. If this reading sounds a bit too metaphysical, we could try an almost diametrically opposed interpretation, according to which all talk of selfhood or identity is merely conventional. That is to say, we have words such as me and you, or life and death, and their meanings are determined by us. We have decided who we are, or who I am, in such a way that it's impossible in our minds to also be a mouse's liver or an insect's arm. We're all too important for that. According to this interpretation, the negativity associated with death is the price tag we've put on it. But how much change can we undergo and still be the same person? Take Vladimir Nabokov. He might have identified as a Russian novelist who was an avid butterfly collector, but he moved to the United States and became an American citizen. If he'd also stopped writing novels and lost his interest in butterflies, would he still have been the same person? Perhaps the answer depends on our attitudes towards these changes. The Zhuangzi could be suggesting that we question this conventionalist attitude and consider more carefully what it is to be us, now and after death. Maybe the Zhuangzi isn't in fact saying that we will survive our own deaths. Maybe it's saying that we never had any independent identities to begin with. As Taoism scholar Angus Graham puts it, "In death I shall remain what at bottom I have always been, identical with all the endlessly transforming phenomena of the universe." We could associate this idea with the passage of the work that would surely have been Nabokov's favorite, the one where Zhuangzi dreams he is a butterfly, then wakes up and wonders whether he isn't in fact a butterfly dreaming he's a human. We mentioned this passage in our first episode on the Zhuangzi as an illustration of its skepticism, but it can be given a narrower interpretation, one that takes the story to deal specifically with our current problem of personal identity. Perhaps identity is what we are supposed to be skeptical about, given that the dream undermines Zhuangzi's confidence about who or what he is. It might also be relevant that the dream is about being a butterfly, a flitting and elusive creature that could represent transience and constant change. The message of the story could, then, be that the constant transformations to which we are subject should destabilize any belief we may have in our selfhood. If so, the point is similar to one made in Chapter 6, which also invokes dreams. How could someone who has undergone a transformation know anything about what has already transformed away, what is over and gone? Even to think I am being specifically here, right now, with specifically you. Is it just that we have not yet begun to awaken from this dream? How can we know what we call self has any self to it? Any or all of the interpretive approaches we've just surveyed could be applied to one of the most dramatic scenes in the Zhuangzi concerning death. In chapter 18, Zhuangzi's argumentative sparring partner, Huizi, finds the sage singing joyfully and using a washtub as a drum. Why? Because his wife has died. Huizi is, of course, appalled. Zhuangzi explains that when his wife passed away, he was at first stricken with grief, as one would expect. But then he reflected and realized that to weep and lament was to act like someone without any understanding of destiny. After all, before she was born, her body was absent, then there was the transformation that produced his wife, and now there has been another change, and she is dead. This startling passage should be read alongside a similar one from chapter 6, which we discussed last time. There, Kongsu's disciple, Zigong, encounters two Taoist sages who are singing and playing a zither in response to the death of a third sage. Like Huizi in the anecdote from chapter 18, Zigong is shocked. But Kongsu, of all people, gives his approval to this departure from ritual propriety. Men such as these look upon life as a dangling wart or swollen pimple, and on death as its dropping off, its bursting and draining. Why then should they make a show of grieving? As promised, we have here the Zhuangzi reflecting on that much debated question of funeral rites, and outdoing even the Moist recommendation to grieve appropriately but frugally. These Taoists instead act as if death is an occasion to celebrate, marking the event as loved one's passage to what? Well, it depends on our understanding of the Zhuangzi. Perhaps the loved one has achieved unity with nature, perhaps they have become a different part of nature, perhaps they've lost their selves, perhaps they've retained it, perhaps they've seen through the shallowness and conventionality of human preferences, or perhaps selfhood was always an illusion in the first place. One can find modern scholars defending versions of all these interpretations, but on any of them, the Taoist attitude towards grief may be more satisfying than the Confucian one. At least, this is the opinion of Chris Fraser. In an article contrasting Xunzi to Zhuangzi, he criticizes the Confucian approach to mourning for its refusal to accept the dramatic rupture that is death. Xunzi explicitly says that funeral rites are designed to uphold and continue the relation that the living bear to the dead, as if the deceased were still alive and should be treated just as they were before. Only gradually should one move the dead person away from the living. This is why, for instance, highly ranked officials get nicer coffins than lowly persons. Social status is one thing that survives death just fine. By contrast, the Taoists accept that the person, at least as we knew them, has irrevocably and suddenly been taken from us. On the other hand, since this is just part of nature or fate, there's no reason to object to it. One puzzle we might have here, though, is why Zhuangzi and the other sages are moved to celebrate in place of mourning. On most of the interpretations just mentioned, it seems that death would be more something neutral than an occasion for singing and music. After all, we don't break out the drums and zithers when swollen pimples burst or individual hairs fall out. Indeed, the Zhuangzi does sometimes express the view that death is neither better nor worse than life. It speaks of a state where we neither delight in life nor abhor death, and says that the sage is like the brave warrior who views death as no different from life. Or take this, part of a description of people from antiquity who grasped what it really means to be human. The genuine humans of old understood nothing about delighting in life or abhorring death. They emerged without delight, sank back in without resistance. They neither forgot where they came from nor inquired into where they would go. Receiving it, they delighted in it. Forgetting all about it, they gave it back. So, we have textual evidence both for the idea that death is something good, and that it is neither good nor bad. Just to complete the picture, we also have passages suggesting that life is, after all, preferable to death. One advantage of following Tao, we learn, is that it makes it possible for us to fully live out our years. Conversely, when the Confucian sage kings disrupted the original simplicity of the people and people started dying young, it's clearly something we are meant to find objectionable. Apparently, the Taoist positive outlook on nature, the heavenly, extends to the idea that it is good to live out one's natural lifespan. Rather than being frustrated by all these competing points of view, we should remember that moving between competing points of view is precisely what the Zhuangzi teaches us to do. Think again about Zhuangzi's reaction to his wife's death. At first he grieves, and then he sings joyfully. We might take the initial reaction to be simply wrong, given that he says it was behavior suitable to someone who lacks an understanding of fate. But we might also say that Zhuangzi has shifted between two perspectives, both of which are appropriate, but in different ways. Seeing this person as his wife, to whom he was deeply attached, Zhuangzi was distraught. But on second thoughts, and now seeing her as part of the universe that has moved on to another stage of the transformation within a good natural order, he can only celebrate. We can use this same tactic to resolve the tension between some of the other interpretations we've considered. For instance, perhaps from a merely human perspective, individual people have an identity that they lose when they die, but from a cosmic point of view, each part remains the part that it is, even if it becomes the liver of a mouse or the arm of an insect. Though it seems difficult to adopt such different points of view simultaneously, the Zhuangzi seems to want us to try. Zhuangzi might not be able to control his wife's death, but he can at least try to change the way he sees her death. To quote chapter 6 one last time, we find there the remark, "Considering my life good is what makes me consider my death good." Perhaps this means something like the following. When Zhuangzi reflects on his wife's nature and the life she led, he's able to situate that life within a cosmos that is constantly changing. One could go further. Perhaps the Zhuangzi is so fascinated by death because it brings home to us so powerfully and inescapably the embeddedness of each person within the ceaseless transformations of the world. Getting a haircut is a transformation too, but it probably isn't going to lead you to deep insights about the dialectic between unity and transience in nature. Mourning for a loved one, or at least doing so in the Taoist way, makes such insights personal in every sense of that word. As Amy Olberding has written, apprehension of the broader patterns of nature can only be genuinely instructive where it is held in check by the immediate, particular, and personal. But before we get carried away congratulating ourselves for such insights, we should acknowledge the current of skepticism that, as ever, runs under the surface of the Zhuangzi. Amidst all the talk of unity and transformations, the text is admirably modest when it comes to the daunting and ineffable question of death. That modesty is expressed in the rhetorical questions that are so typical of the Zhuangzi. For instance, where does life go? Where does it not go? And how do I know that in hating death I am not like an orphan who left home in youth and no longer knows the way back? Ultimately, we don't know for sure what death will bring, but as far as the Zhuangzi is concerned, you don't need certain knowledge to achieve a certain degree of acceptance. We've now spent quite a few episodes on the Zhuangzi, but it's such a wonderful text that we think we can offer you one more installment without being accused of flogging a dead horse. We've just said that the Zhuangzi often seems to be at peace with ignorance, but it also countenances outright absurdity. Over the last weeks, we've often struggled to extract a consistent set of ideas from the work. Did that effort even make any sense? You'll find out, or not find out, or quite possibly both, next time here on the History of Philosophy in China.